Cafe owner kicks out elderly black woman, unaware Johnny Depp is watching. On a crisp spring morning in Manhattan, 72-year-old Maddie Parker, a black woman whose life had been shaped by resilience, stepped into one of New York City's most exclusive new cafes. She had been seeking nothing more than a moment of warmth and reprieve from the chilly street. However, the icy stare and venomous words of the cafe's owner turned what should have been a simple stop into a humiliating public spectacle of prejudice and cruelty. Surrounded by indifferent patrons who avoided her gaze, Maddie faced humiliation. Yet, amidst the silence and discomfort, someone of great influence witnessed the ordeal as it unfolded. What followed would shake the foundations of the establishment, captivate millions around the world, and ultimately change Maddie's life forever. Earlier that day, Maddie had felt the cold spring air nip at her cheeks as she carefully navigated the bustling New York City sidewalk. At 72 years old, she had seen countless spring mornings in the city, but this one seemed particularly harsh. The sky hung low and gray, with the sharp breeze carrying specks of pollen that irritated her eyes and throat. Clutching her light jacket closer to her slender frame, Maddie pressed on, her arthritis making the uneven pavement a calculated challenge. A quick glance at her watch, 12:45 p.m., reminded her of the strict medication schedule she followed daily, a routine she had long accepted. Turning a corner, her eyes caught sight of an elegant cafe occupying the ground floor of a sleek, glass-fronted office tower. Grand opening banners and floral displays framed the entrance, their vibrant colors standing out against the gray cityscape. Maddie hesitated, but the thought of stepping into a warm, inviting space for a brief respite won her over. Checking her watch again, 12:50 p.m., she decided there was enough time to take her medication along with a soothing cup of hot water. With a small nod to herself, she pushed open the cafe's glass doors. Inside, she was greeted by the scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods, accompanied by the gentle strains of soft jazz. The cafe's minimalist decor, all polished surfaces and muted earth tones, exuded sophistication. Maddie made her way to a round booth near the back, sinking into its plush leather seat with a sigh of relief. Her usual routine began. She removed her pill bottle, compact mirror, and lipstick from her purse, preparing for her midday medication. These small rituals offered her a sense of control over the Addison's disease that so often dictated her life. At 12:58 p.m., as Maddie smiled with satisfaction at keeping to her schedule, a sharp, pointed clearing of a throat snapped her out of her momentary peace. Looking up, she found herself face to face with a tall, sharp-featured man whose expression radiated hostility. "Can I help you?" Maddie asked, her voice calm despite the tension. The man's lip curled into a sneer. "I think the question is, what are you doing here, ma'am?" His tone dripped with disdain. Taken aback, Maddie blinked. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. I'm just here to have a quick snack and some water. The server mentioned you asked for an extra warm towel," he said, his gaze raking over her with subtle contempt. "We don't do special requests." "That's fine," Maddie replied evenly. "I'll just have the pastry and the hot water then." The man barked out a harsh laugh. "Pastry? In those clothes? With that skin color? This isn't a charity kitchen, Grandma." The words stung like a slap. Fighting to maintain her composure, Maddie straightened. "Sir, I'd like to speak to the manager, please." The man's sneer widened. Tapping the name tag pinned to his chest, he said, "James Whittaker, manager and owner. At your service?" His sarcasm was biting, cutting through her patience. Taking a deep breath, Maddie replied, "Mr. Whittaker, I don't know what's prompted this behavior, but I'm a paying customer just like anyone else here. I simply need to take my medication and have a snack. There's no reason for this unpleasantness." Leaning in, Whittaker lowered his voice to a venomous hiss. "Your kind brings bad luck. You'll scare off the real customers. The professionals, the rich people making business deals. This isn't some dive bar or greasy spoon, lady. You're not welcome here." Maddie's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. Mr. Whitaker, I have as much right to be here as anyone else. My medical condition, Addison's disease, requires careful timing for my medication. I just need to take my pills, have some water, and I'll be on my way. Save your excuses, Whitaker said, waving dismissively. I don't care if you've got 3 heads under that tacky sweater. You don't belong here. There's an old cafe downtown where your kind usually goes. I suggest you take your condition there. As Maddie opened her mouth to respond, the young waitress appeared, carefully balancing a tray with her order. Time seemed to slow as she watched Whitaker turn toward the approaching waitress. His movements were deliberate, almost calculated. In one swift motion, he intercepted the tray, his fingers curling around its edges. "Sir, what are you?" the waitress began, but her words were abruptly cut off. Whitaker pivoted sharply, and with a flick of his wrists, the tray's contents went flying. The cup of hot water arched through the air, its contents spreading in a scalding fan. The small plate holding the berry tart followed, spinning like a discus. Maddie barely had time to raise her hands in a futile attempt to shield herself. The hot water hit first, splashing across her arms and face. Pain erupted instantly, angry red splotches blooming on her skin. The tart followed, smearing across her pink sweater and leaving streaks of purple-red filling. A cry of pain and shock escaped Maddie's lips, and the cafe fell silent. All eyes turned toward the corner booth, drawn to the unfolding spectacle. Whitaker's face twisted into a mockery of concern. "Oh my, how clumsy of me," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am. Your appearance must have distracted me." Maddie's arms throbbed, the pain intensifying with each passing second. "Please," she managed to gasp. "I need a medical kit, some ice at least." Whitaker's fake concern instantly morphed back into a sneer. He leaned closer, his voice low but dripping with venom. "A medical kit for a little spill? Don't be so dramatic, old woman. If you need to clean up, use the restroom." The young waitress stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. "Mr. Whitaker, shouldn't we get back to work?" Whitaker snapped, cutting her off. "And bring a mop. Our valued customers shouldn't have to look at this mess." Maddie's hands trembled as she reached for her purse, desperate to salvage what she could. As she moved, her eyes fell on the pill bottle, now drenched. The water had seeped inside. Her heart sank as she realized her expensive, life-saving medication was likely ruined. Fighting back tears of pain and humiliation, Maddie clutched the damaged pill bottle and struggled to her feet. Each step felt monumental, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on her. She could feel the stares of other patrons following her as she made her way to the restroom, leaving a trail of water droplets behind. Once inside, the bathroom door swung shut, and Maddie leaned against it, her breath coming in shaky gasps. The encounter had lasted mere minutes but felt like an eternity. She looked down at her arms and cheeks, wincing at the angry red marks left by the hot water. Her pink sweater, a cherished favorite, was a mess of water stains and smeared berry filling. But it was the pill bottle in her trembling hand that brought tears to her eyes. Those small white tablets represented more than just medication, they were her lifeline. Carefully budgeted and meticulously taken, they were crucial to her survival. Now, because of one man's cruelty, that lifeline was in jeopardy. Maddie squared her shoulders and straightened up, her reflection staring back at her from the spotless bathroom mirror. Her usual neat appearance was in disarray, but it was the look in her eyes that caught her attention. Beneath the fear, there was a flicker of determination, a resilience forged by decades of facing prejudice and hardship. Her eyes darted to her watch. 1:20 p.m. Panic jolted through her. She was now 20 minutes past her critical medication window, a dangerous delay for someone with Addison's disease. For Maddie, strict timing wasn't just a routine, it was a matter of life and death. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "You've been through worse. Think it through." With trembling hands, she opened the pill bottle. The label was smeared, peeling away from the plastic. Inside, most of the pills had disintegrated into a pasty mess. The acrid smell of dissolved medication stung her nostrils. Maddie's mind raced, calculating the cost of replacing the ruined pills. These weren't ordinary over-the-counter tablets. They were specialized, expensive, and utterly irreplaceable in that moment. Another wave of dizziness hit her, stronger this time. Maddie gripped the sink, her knuckles turning white. She recognized the signs. Low blood pressure, mounting fatigue, and, if unchecked, the potential for a full-blown Addisonian crisis. The oppressive weight of her wet clothes clung to her skin. Her favorite sweater, a comforting constant in her life, now felt suffocating. She dabbed futilely at the stains with a paper towel, only spreading the mess further. Desperate, she sifted through the ruined pills, searching for anything salvageable. Finally, she found one, slightly damp but mostly intact. It wasn't ideal, but it was all she had. Staring at the small white pill in her palm, Maddie swallowed hard, trying to choke it down dry. Her throat constricted, and she coughed violently. Turning on the tap, she cupped water into her hands, gulping it down to wash the pill down. As she straightened, water dripping from her chin, Maddie caught her reflection once more. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from the sheer indignity of it all. Taking a deep breath, she composed herself as best she could. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her sweater, and gathered her resolve. It was time to face the hostile world outside once again. With a final deep breath, Maddie opened the bathroom door. The aggressive air conditioning hit her damp clothes like a physical blow. Maddie shivered, wrapping her arms around herself as she stepped back into the main cafe. The chill seemed to seep into her bones, a fitting metaphor for the cold reception she'd received here. As Maddie emerged from the restroom, a low rumble of thunder reverberated through the cafe. She paused at the doorway, watching gusts of wind rattle the large windows at the front of the establishment. It seemed the weather had taken a turn for the worse, mirroring the turbulent atmosphere inside. For a moment, Maddie considered making a dash for it. Braving the elements seemed preferable to remaining in this hostile environment. But another clap of thunder, louder this time, made her reconsider. In her weakened state and still reeling from the assault, venturing out into a spring storm could be dangerous. With a resigned sigh, Maddie turned back toward the dining area. Her eyes immediately landed on the booth she had originally occupied, only to find it now taken by a couple in crisp business suits. They were engaged in quiet conversation, seemingly oblivious to the drama that had unfolded there just minutes ago. The pointed nature of the seating arrangement wasn't lost on Maddie. Whitaker had deliberately given away her table. Another calculated move, another way to demonstrate just how unwelcome she was in his establishment. Maddie's gaze swept the room, searching for a safe haven. She spotted an empty booth in the far corner, as distant from her original spot as possible. Moving carefully to avoid drawing attention, she made her way across the cafe floor. As she slid into the booth, a shiver ran through her body. Her damp clothes clung uncomfortably to her skin, and she realized with dismay that she was seated directly under an air conditioning vent. The cold air blowing down on her made her teeth chatter. Maddie huddled in on herself, trying to conserve what little body heat she had left. She debated her next move. Part of her wanted nothing more than to leave and never return, but the worsening weather outside and her still precarious medical state made that a risky proposition. Her eyes landed on a nearby table, where a man had just taken a seat. For a brief moment, Maddie considered asking to switch places with him to escape the direct blast of the AC, but the memory of Whitaker's hostility made her hesitate. Drawing attention to herself would only invite more confrontation. After a moment's deliberation, Maddie made a decision. She would stay put but try to improve her situation as best she could. Summoning her courage, she caught the eye of a passing waitress, not the young woman from earlier, but an older server with a kind face. "Excuse me," Maddie called softly, her voice trembling slightly. The waitress approached, a wary look in her eyes. Clearly, word of the earlier incident had spread among the staff. "Yes, ma'am?" the waitress asked, her tone cautious but not unkind. Maddie mustered a smile, trying to project calm despite her inner turmoil. "I'm sorry to trouble you, but I was wondering if it might be possible to adjust the air conditioning. It's blowing directly on me, and with my clothes being damp, I'm feeling quite chilled." The waitress's expression softened slightly. "I'll see what I can do about redirecting the vent, ma'am. Would you like me to bring you some hot water to help warm you up?" Relief washed over Maddie. "That would be wonderful, thank you." As the waitress turned to leave, a familiar and unwelcome voice cut through the air. "Is there a problem here?" Maddie's heart sank as she looked up to see James Whittaker approaching, his face set in a mask of barely contained anger. The waitress visibly tensed, stepping back as the manager inserted himself into the situation. "No problem at all," Maddie replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I was just asking if the air conditioning could be adjusted slightly." Whittaker's eyes narrowed. "The temperature in my establishment is set for the comfort of our paying customers. If you're cold, perhaps that's a sign you should move along." Maddie felt a flicker of anger ignite within her. She had tried to be accommodating to avoid conflict, but enough was enough. "Mr. Whittaker," she began, her voice low but firm, "I understand this is your cafe, but I am a paying customer just like anyone else here. I have as much right to be comfortable as anyone else." Whittaker's face flushed red. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Listen here, you old bat. I own this place. That means I decide who's welcome and who isn't. And let me make this crystal clear. You are not welcome. Your money, God knows where it comes from, might as well be worthless." As he spoke, Whittaker's body language became increasingly aggressive. He loomed over Maddie, his presence threatening. Maddie found herself shrinking back in her seat, her earlier bravado faltering in the face of such open hostility. The confrontation was drawing attention now. Other patrons were turning to watch, their expressions a mix of confusion and discomfort. The waitress hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Maddie's mind raced, searching for a way to defuse the situation, but before she could speak, Whittaker's next actions would escalate things beyond anything she could have anticipated. The tension in the air was palpable as Whittaker glared down at Maddie, his face contorted with barely contained rage. For a moment, the café seemed frozen in a tableau of hostility and fear. Then, with a sharp snap of his fingers, Whittaker shattered the silence. "You too," he barked, gesturing at a pair of burly servers nearby. "Escort this woman out immediately." As murmurs rippled through the tables, Whittaker quickly concocted an excuse. His tone dripped with feigned disgust. "She just wet herself," he announced loudly. His words elicited gasps and uncomfortable glances from the onlookers. The lie hung in the air, cruel and deliberate, as Whittaker cast a cold, triumphant glance in Maddie's direction. The servers exchanged uneasy glances but moved to comply. They approached Maddie's booth, their discomfort evident in their hesitant movements. "Please, ma'am," one of them said, his voice low, "don't make this harder than it needs to be." Maddie's heart raced as she looked from one server to the other, then back to Whittaker's smug face. "This isn't right," she protested, her voice shaking. "I've done nothing wrong." But her words fell on deaf ears. With a nod from Whittaker, the servers reached for Maddie's arms. Their grip, while not overtly rough, was firm and unyielding as they attempted to pull her from the booth. Maddie's foot caught on the table leg. Time seemed to slow as she felt herself losing balance. She flailed, trying to catch herself, but the momentum was too great. With a cry of alarm, she tumbled forward, landing hard on the café's polished floor. The impact knocked the wind out of her, and as Maddie lay there, struggling to catch her breath, she heard a clatter. Her purse had spilled open in the fall, and her pill bottle skittered across the tiles, spilling its ruined contents. A hush fell over the café. Patrons stared in shocked silence at the elderly woman sprawled on the floor, surrounded by the scattered remnants of her medication. The only sounds were Maddie's labored breathing and the soft plink of pills rolling across the smooth floor. Maddie closed her eyes, fighting back tears of pain and humiliation. In all her years, through all the hardships and indignities she'd faced, she'd never felt so utterly helpless and exposed. The servers stood frozen, clearly shocked by the outcome of their actions. Even Whitaker seemed taken aback, though his expression quickly hardened back into one of disdain. "Well," Whitaker snapped at the servers, "don't just stand there. Get her out of here." But before anyone could move, a new voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "That's quite enough." Heads turned toward the source of the interruption. There, striding purposefully from the back of the cafe, was a face known to millions: Johnny Depp. The actor's presence immediately shifted the room's energy. Patrons whispered and pointed, phones appearing in hands as people tried to discreetly capture the moment. But Depp paid no attention to the stir he was causing. His focus was entirely on the scene before him. As he approached, Depp's eyes met Maddie's. There was a gentleness in his gaze, a stark contrast to the hostility she'd faced from Whitaker. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her, offering a hand. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice low and kind. Maddie nodded, unable to find her voice. "I'm afraid you've wandered into a rather unpleasant situation. This woman was just leaving." Depp turned to face Whitaker, his expression hardening. "The only unpleasant thing I see here is your treatment of this lady. Would you care to explain why you felt it necessary to physically remove an elderly woman from your establishment?" Whitaker's face flushed. "This is my cafe. I have the right to refuse service to anyone." "Refuse service?" Depp replied coolly. "Yes. But assault? Discrimination? I think you'll find the law takes a rather dim view of such actions." As Whitaker sputtered, trying to formulate a response, Depp turned back to Maddie. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you out of here and find something warm for you." With that, Depp guided Maddie toward the exit, his presence creating a natural path through the now buzzing crowd of onlookers. As they reached the door, Depp paused, looking back at Whitaker. "I'd suggest you take a long, hard look at how you run this place," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed cafe, "because I have a feeling you're going to be answering some difficult questions very soon." And with that, Johnny Depp and Maddie stepped out into the rainy New York afternoon, leaving behind a stunned cafe and a fuming James Whitaker. As he spoke about his mother, his voice took on a warm, reverent tone. "When I was growing up, I saw firsthand the kind of prejudice and hardship she faced. She was the strongest person I've ever known. No matter how tough things got, she never lost her dignity, but I could see how much it hurt her when people looked down on her or treated her like she was less because of her job or our financial situation." Maddie nodded, understanding crossing her face. "It leaves marks that don't show on the outside," she said softly. "Exactly," Depp agreed. "And you know, in my line of work, I've experienced both sides of that coin. I've felt the adulation that comes with fame, but I've also felt the sting of public judgment and misunderstanding. It's given me a deep appreciation for those who face prejudice and mistreatment every day." He leaned back, his gaze distant for a moment. "A lot of the roles I choose are characters who are overlooked or misunderstood by society. In a way, I guess it's my attempt to give a voice to those who might not otherwise be heard." Maddie listened intently, seeing the actor in a new light. As Depp spoke, she reached into her purse, her fingers closing around the damp pill bottle. She hesitated for a moment before pulling it out. "Mr. Depp," she said, her voice catching slightly. "This is what started all the trouble in the cafe." She held out the bottle, its label smeared and peeling. "I have a condition called Addison's disease. These pills, they're not just medication, they're my lifeline." Depp's expression turned serious as he examined the bottle. "I've heard of Addison's disease, but I don't know much about it. Can you tell me more?" Maddie nodded, launching into an explanation she'd given many times before, but never in such surreal circumstances. "It's an adrenal insufficiency. My body doesn't produce certain essential hormones, so I have to take medication to replace them. The timing is crucial. Missing a dose could lead to a crisis, which could be life-threatening." She sighed, looking at the ruined pills. And they're expensive. I budget carefully each month to afford them. When that man dumped water on me, he didn't just ruin my clothes. He put my health at risk and wasted money I can't easily replace. Depp listened intently, his brow furrowed in concern. Without hesitation, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. "Miss Parker," he said, using her name for the first time, "I'd like to help, if you'll let me." Maddie watched, emotions playing across her face, as Depp wrote out a check. When he handed it to her, her eyes widened at the amount. "Mr. Depp, this is far too much. I couldn't possibly." He held up a hand, smiling gently. "Please, I insist. Use what you need for your medication, and if there's anything left over, consider it a buffer for future expenses, or maybe a little treat for yourself after what you've been through today. You deserve it." Maddie accepted the check with trembling hands, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what else to say." With a smile that softened his voice, Depp addressed the elderly woman. "Now then, my dear, where shall I whisk you away to? Your doctor, perhaps? Or home to your apartment?" Maddie gave a gentle smile, her voice warm with gratitude. "Home at my apartment would be nice." Johnny nodded, his expression a mix of care and theatrical flourish. "Home it is, then. Your chariot awaits, madam." The sleek black car pulled up to a weathered apartment building with a faded brick facade, starkly contrasting the luxury vehicle. Maddie gazed out the window, a mix of relief and embarrassment washing over her. This was her home, a far cry from the glamorous world Johnny Depp usually inhabited. "This is me," she said softly, her hand resting on the door handle. Depp looked at the building, his eyes taking in the peeling paint and cracked concrete step. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "there's a lot of character in old buildings like this. They've got stories to tell." Maddie smiled, touched by his attempt to put her at ease. "Oh, if these walls could talk," she chuckled, "they'd have quite a few tales." As they prepared to exit the car, movement near the building's entrance caught their attention. A lanky teenager paced back and forth, occasionally checking his phone with growing frustration. "Oh my," Maddie said, recognition dawning. "That's my grandson, Michael. I completely forgot he was coming by today to help with groceries." They watched as Michael tried the door again, then threw his hands up in exasperation. Depp grinned. "Looks like someone's not too happy about being locked out." As they stepped out of the car, Michael looked up. His expression transformed from annoyance to utter disbelief as he recognized the man accompanying his grandmother. "Gran," he called out, his voice cracking slightly. Are you with Johnny Depp?" Depp raised a hand in a friendly wave, causing Michael's jaw to drop even further. Maddie couldn't help but chuckle at her grandson's reaction. "Hello, Michael," she called back. "I'm sorry I'm late. It's been quite an afternoon." As they approached, Michael's eyes darted between his grandmother and the Hollywood star, clearly struggling to process the surreal scene. "Gran, what happened? Are you okay? How did you? Why is—" Maddie patted her grandson's arm reassuringly. "It's a long story, dear. Why don't we go inside and I'll explain everything?" She fumbled for her keys. Michael couldn't contain his excitement. "Mr. Depp, I'm a huge fan. I've seen all your movies. Pirates of the Caribbean, Edward Scissorhands, Sweeney Todd, they're amazing." Depp smiled warmly. "Thank you, Michael. It's always nice to meet a fan. Your grandmother is quite an impressive lady, you know." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, I know. Gran's the best. But how did you two meet? Did she win some contest or something?" Maddie had finally managed to open the door. "Michael dear, why don't you help me inside? Mr. Depp needs to be on his way, I'm sure." Depp nodded, understanding Maddie's desire for privacy. "It was a pleasure meeting you both," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Maddie. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." As Depp turned to leave, Michael called out, "Wait, did any money change hands? Because if it did, I think we should talk about how to invest it or… Michael, Maddie interrupted sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned back to Depp, offering a grateful smile. Thank you again for everything, Mr. Depp. You've been far too kind. With a final wave, Johnny Depp returned to his waiting car, leaving Maddie to guide her still-stunned grandson into the building. As they made their way up the worn stairs, Maddie reflected on the day's events. The cruelty she had faced, the unexpected kindness from a stranger, and the challenge of explaining it all to her grandson without revealing the extent of Depp's generosity. She clutched her purse a little tighter, feeling the weight of the check inside. It was a secret she would keep, for now at least. Some kindnesses, she knew, were best kept close to the heart. The door to Maddie's apartment creaked open, revealing a modest but tidy living space. Faded floral wallpaper and well-worn furniture spoke of a life lived with care, if not luxury. As Maddie settled into her favorite armchair, Michael perched on the edge of the sofa, practically vibrating with curiosity. "Okay, Gran," he burst out, unable to contain himself any longer. "You've got to tell me everything. How did you end up with Johnny Depp? Did he give you any money? Because if he did, we could really use that too," Maddie interrupted, her voice firm but gentle. "Before we discuss anything else, I think we need to have a conversation about values and integrity, Michael." His excitement deflated slightly as he recognized the serious tone. "What do you mean, Gran?" Maddie leaned forward, locking eyes with her grandson. "When something unexpected happens in life, our first thought shouldn't be about how we can profit from it. That kind of thinking is a slippery slope. What happened today was the result of a very unpleasant situation. Mr. Depp showed kindness to a stranger in need. That's not something to be exploited." Michael looked down, embarrassment coloring his cheek. "I'm sorry, Gran. I didn't mean to sound greedy. It's just, I know things have been tight, and I thought maybe this could help." Maddie's expression softened. "I understand, dear. But real success, lasting success, doesn't come from looking for shortcuts or handouts. It comes from hard work, integrity, and treating others with respect." She reached out, patting Michael's hand. "Mr. Depp didn't become successful by taking advantage of others. He worked hard, honed his craft, and from what I saw today, he never forgot the importance of kindness." Michael nodded slowly, absorbing his grandmother's words. "You're right, Gran. I guess I got carried away with the excitement of it all." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. After a moment, Michael spoke up again, his tone more subdued. "So, what did happen today? How did you end up meeting Johnny Depp?" Maddie sighed, preparing to recount the events. But before she could begin, the TV in the corner, which Michael had absently switched on when they entered, caught their attention. Breaking news flashed across the screen. Hollywood star Johnny Depp has publicly called out a New York City cafe owner for alleged discrimination and assault against an elderly patron. Michael's eyes widened as footage from Depp's impromptu press conference outside the cafe played on screen. The camera panned to show James Whittaker, looking decidedly uncomfortable as he faced a barrage of questions from reporters. "I want to apologize," Whittaker stammered, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "To Miss Parker and to Mr. Depp. My actions were inexcusable, and I'm prepared to face the consequences." As the news segment continued detailing the incident and the swift public backlash against the cafe, Michael turned to his grandmother in awe. "Gran, that was you. You're the one he helped." Maddie nodded, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "Yes, dear. It wasn't how I expected my afternoon to go, that's for certain." Michael listened intently as Maddie recounted the events at the cafe, his expression shifting from shock to anger to admiration as the story unfolded. When she finished, he shook his head in disbelief. "Gran, you're amazing," he said softly. "After all that, you're still so calm." "I don't know if I could have handled it that way," Maddie smiled, reaching out to squeeze her grandson's hand. "Life gives us many teachers, Michael. Sometimes they come in the form of cruel cafe owners, and sometimes they come in the form of unexpected Hollywood stars. The important thing is to learn from each experience and always strive to be the best version of yourself. As the afternoon wore on, their conversation shifted to more practical matters. Michael helped Maddie sort through her medications, making note of what needed to be replaced. "Maddie," she said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "I'm going to need to see the doctor to get a new prescription for my medication. Would you be able to help me make an appointment and come with me?" Michael nodded immediately. "Of course, Gran. When do you want to go?" Maddie sighed, rubbing her temples. "As soon as possible, really. In a few hours or this evening. After today's incident, I'm running dangerously low on my medication. Could you call the hospital now and see if they can fit me in today?" "Absolutely," Michael replied, pulling out his phone to check the doctor's schedule on the hospital's website. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, his brow furrowing in focus. "Thank you, dear," Maddie said with a tired smile. "I'll go rest inside for now. It's been such a long day." Her voice trailed off, heavy with weariness, as she turned to head inside. "Wait, Gran," Michael called, and Maddie paused at the door. With a mischievous glint in his eye, he asked, "Next time I come over, do you think I could bring my Pirates of the Caribbean hat? You know, just in case Johnny Depp stops by again?" Maddie chuckled, shaking her head fondly. "Oh, Michael. I think it's safe to say that was a once-in-a-lifetime encounter." Michael grinned. "But you never know, right?" Maddie gestured toward his bedroom, and as the door clicked shut behind her grandson, she made her way inside. With deliberate care, she retrieved the check from its hidden spot, holding it in her hands for a long moment, contemplating its significance. After a deep breath, she tucked it securely into her dresser drawer and locked it. Tomorrow, she'd head to the bank to deposit it, ensuring a safety net for her growing medical expenses. But for now, as she prepared for bed, Maddie reflected on the day's events. The cruelty she'd faced, the unexpected kindness, and the valuable lesson she'd been able to impart to her grandson. It all swirled together in her mind as she drifted off to sleep, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. Life would always have its challenges, but it also had a way of surprising you with moments of grace and humanity when you least expected them. And sometimes those moments could change everything.